Hey, we are going to do a little bit of exploring with some numbers. Now, by exploring, we're going to play with some numbers and see if we can learn some stuff. First of all, hopefully you can remember from previous lessons, our positive integers, in other words, whole numbers, I can start at 0 and draw a number line that represents them going up to the right. But what happens if I start at 0 and instead I go down to the left? Well, I end up getting into the territory of what we call the negative numbers, all the numbers that are less than 0. And I can represent them on a number line that goes off in both directions. From 0 up to the right are my positive integers. From 0 down to the left are my negative integers. These little arrows on my number line represent that it goes on and on and on. Where does it end? Well, it kind of doesn't. Going up to the right, I go up to this little symbol. It's like an 8 on its side that represents infinity. In other words, it's a number, but we never get there. It goes on forever. Just like I have at the other end of the scale, negative infinity. So the numbers go down towards negative infinity. Now up to the right, we say as we go further along, our numbers get larger. So 6 is larger than or is greater than 5. But when we go down to the left, they actually get smaller. So negative 6 is less than negative 5. Even though 6 is a higher value, negative 6 is smaller than negative 5. And the further we go down to the left, the smaller the numbers get. So for example, negative 32,000. Now that's got a lot of digits in it. It looks quite big to write. But because it's a negative, it's way, 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 way down the left here. So we say it's a very, very small number. So let's have a look at how we can do sums like this one. Negative 2, take another 3 equals what? And we can represent this visually on our number line. The first number, the negative 2, in this case, is where we start on our number line. So we're going to start here at negative 2. We are subtracting another 3. Now subtracting means we move in this direction. We move left along the number line. So if I start at negative 2 and I move 3 places down to subtract 1, 2, 3, I end up at negative 5. So starting at negative 2, take another 3, I end up at negative 5. We can visually show on the number line our subtraction. Now, I'm going to go through this little sort of visual representation here to try and help get your head around some weird concepts, I guess, around adding and subtracting negative numbers. Here's a beaker full of water. It's starting at 20 degrees Celsius. That's the temperature of the water. Each one of these little red dots represents 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature, and every one of the negative blue dots represents 1 degree Celsius drop in temperature. So if I added 5 positives to this, my temperature would now become 25 degrees. I've heated it up by 5 degrees. And I can write that out here. Mathematically, this is what it looks like. I had 20. I added 5 positives, plus 5, to get to 25. Let's take 2 of those out, and you'll see now it's dropped to 23 degrees. So mathematically, that is 25. I took away 2, and I'm now at 23. So far, so good. Let's put the other 2 back in, so we're at 25 degrees. I'm going to add 2 negatives. I was at 25, and I added negative 2. Mathematically, I can see that now I've dropped to 23 degrees. Mathematically, that looks like this. I was at 25, I added negative 2, and I got to 23. Now, have a look at these 2 numbers here. Both of these got me the same result. Subtracting 2 was exactly the same as adding negative 2. And that's my first big learning out of this, is that adding a negative is the same as subtracting. So if you see a plus and a minus sign next to each other, it's the same as if there was just a negative sign, where adding a negative is the same as subtracting. Let's add some negatives back in. So now we've made our temperature balanced back out at 20 degrees Celsius. I'm going to add one more positive. So mathematically, we've got up to 21 degrees. Let's have a look at that mathematically. I had 20 degrees. I added 1, and I got to 21. All right, so let's go back to our balanced out at 20 degrees. This time, I'm going to take away 1 negative. I took away a negative 1. My temperature now has risen to 21 degrees. So mathematically, here's what happened. I was at 20. I took away a negative 1, and I got to 21. what do you notice? These two numbers are the same. So here's our second big learning. Subtracting a negative, which is what we did here, we subtracted a negative number, is exactly the same as adding. In other words, two negatives make a positive. In fact, if I can do this without bumping the microphone, if you take two negative signs like this next to each other, they make a positive. Two negatives make a positive. And that might be a little sort of physical way you can remember what's going on there. Let's look at some examples. 6 plus negative 3 equals 3 because adding a negative is the same as subtracting. 8 plus negative 6. Now what the difference is here is that sometimes you might see the negative numbers written inside a set of brackets. It's okay, it's still the same thing. We've got a plus and a minus, adding a negative number. Adding a negative number is the same as subtracting, so this is just the same as 8 minus 6, which equals 2. What about over here on this side? 9 take away negative 5. Now we said subtracting a negative is just adding. So these two negatives make a positive. So it will be 9 plus 5, which gives me 14. Finally, you might also see, like I said, negative numbers written inside brackets. Well, the same thing's going on here. I'm still subtracting a negative number. Two negatives make a positive. So 3 plus 1 gives me 4. All right, hopefully that helps you understand the idea of why subtracting a negative, which we did here with our little temperature dots going in and out of the water. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding, and adding a negative is the same as subtracting. Well done.